Scary telling. I couldn't believe it. A hurricane was headed our way, and it was projected to hit us soon. My husband Mikhail and I had always felt safe and secure in our beachfront house in suburban Miami, but this news had me worried. We had always been told that our house was fully hurricane-proof, but we had never experienced anything like this before. As a doctor, Mikhail was used to dealing with emergencies, but this was different. We had 2 teenage daughters, Anastasia and Tatiana, who were both excelling in high school academically. I didn't want anything to happen to them, especially not during a catastrophic storm like this. We watched the local news as the meteorologists warned us of the storm's approach. The hurricane was rapidly developing just east of the Bahamas and was projected to track steadily westward, setting its sights on Florida. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I watched the dark, ominous clouds race across the screen. "Paulina, are you seeing this?" Mikhail exclaimed. "We might have a hurricane headed toward us soon." I tried to stay calm. "Hey, chances are it'll probably be a weak one. I don't think we should worry," I said, trying to reassure him. But as the days passed, the hurricane grew stronger. The meteorologists upgraded it to an extremely powerful Category 5 storm. I could hear the winds howling outside as palm trees snapped and blew away. Sheets of rain pounded against the glass windows, and a dense mist of white set in, cloaking a vague outline of the angry ocean. Despite the severity of the storm, we still decided not to evacuate. After all, our house was fully hurricane-proof. We had been told so when we bought it, and we had always believed it to be true. But as the wind screamed and the rain pounded against the windows, I started to have my doubts. Anastasia and Tatiana were frightened, but Mikhail and I tried to comfort them. We told them that they would be safe, that our house would protect us from the worst of the storm. But deep down, I knew that there was only so much we could do. Hours into the ordeal, the winds grew even stronger, and the ocean swelled and began banging against the house. I felt the house vibrate multiple times. And then, I heard it. A crack. A torrent of seawater surged into the house as the first floor windows and walls buckled. Mikhail and I rushed to the second floor with Anastasia and Tatiana. We watched in horror as our beloved house succumbed to Mother Nature's cruelty. The storm was far worse than we could have ever imagined, and I began to fear for our lives. As the storm raged on, I couldn't help but notice something strange happening in the ocean. Through the rain and mist, I caught sight of a black, serpentine figure swimming swiftly in the debris-clogged waters. At first, I thought it might be a log or some other piece of debris that had been washed out to sea. But as it drew closer, I realized that it was alive. The creature was long and sinewy, with 6 beady, blue eyes and a crescent-shaped head. And it was heading straight towards our house. I called out to Mikhail and the girls, and we all huddled together in fear. The creature swam closer and closer, until we could see it clearly in the swirling waters below. "What is that thing?" Anastasia asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Mikhail said, his face pale. "But we need to be careful. It could be dangerous." As the creature approached, I could see that it was massive. It was roughly the length of 5 school buses, and its body was covered in slimy scales. Its breath reeked of rotten fish and seaweed, and it revealed a long, forked prehensile tongue as it swam towards us. The creature rose to the level of the second floor and gave us a cold stare with its 6 beady, blue eyes. It even raised its gaping mouth, filled with multiple rows of needle-like teeth and fragments of bone, to give a murderous grin. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this creature was not something to be taken lightly. "What are we going to do?" Tatiana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I said. But we need to stay together and try to stay safe. As the creature lunged towards us, we tried to fight back. But it was too strong. It wrapped its slimy body around us, crushing us with its immense strength. I felt my bones snapping and my body being torn apart as the creature devoured me. But then, suddenly, I woke up. It was all just a nightmare, a figment of my imagination. I looked around the room, relieved to see that everything was still intact. But as I got out of bed and looked out the window, I saw the storm still raging on outside. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting for us. The next morning, the storm was still raging on, and the ominous feeling from my nightmare stayed with me. I couldn't shake the sense that something was out there, waiting for us. As we sat in the living room, huddled together and listening to the howling wind, I started to feel increasingly restless. I knew that we needed to do something to protect ourselves, but I wasn't sure what. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "We can't stay in this house any longer." "But where can we go?" Mikhail asked. "The storm is still raging outside. It's not safe to go anywhere." "I don't care," I said. "We need to try. We can't just sit here and wait for that thing to come back." The girls looked at us, wide-eyed and terrified. I knew that we needed to be strong for them, but it was getting harder and harder to keep up the facade. We gathered our things and made our way towards the front door. As we stepped outside, the wind almost knocked us off our feet. Debris was flying everywhere, and the rain was pounding down so hard that it felt like needles on our skin. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice barely audible above the noise of the storm. "We can't stop until we find somewhere safe." We ran as fast as we could, dodging fallen trees and pieces of debris as we went. I could hear the sound of the creature's body slapping against the waves in the distance, and it only made me run faster. We stumbled upon an abandoned building, and we decided to take shelter there. It was dark and damp, but at least it was better than being out in the storm. As we huddled together in the corner, I heard the sound of the creature's breathing getting closer and closer. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I knew that we were in for a desperate struggle. The creature burst through the door, its eyes glowing in the dark. We tried to fight back, but it was too strong. It wrapped its slimy body around us, crushing us with its immense strength. As I felt my bones snapping and my body being torn apart, I knew that this was it. We were never going to make it out of here alive. I woke up screaming. It was just another nightmare, but it felt so real. The storm was still raging outside, and the feeling of dread that had been building up inside me since the creature appeared was now overwhelming. I got up and walked to the window, peering through the rain and mist. And then, I saw it. The creature was out there, lurking in the waves, waiting for its next prey. I knew then that we were never going to make it out of this alive. The creature was too strong, too fast, too vicious. It seemed to revel in our fear and pain, relishing every moment of the slaughter. As the storm raged on, the creature devoured us one by one. My husband Mikhail was the first to go, and then my daughters Anastasia and Tatiana. I screamed in terror as I felt my bones snapping and my body being torn apart. The creature seemed to take pleasure in our suffering, and it seemed to go on forever. And then, suddenly, it was over. The creature disappeared back into the churning waters, satiated for the time being. I was alone now, surrounded by the debris of our former lives. There was no evidence of my family's existence, except for the blood-stained debris that littered the beach. The storm had destroyed everything we had worked so hard to build, and the creature had taken everything else. I knew that I had to get out of there, but I didn't know where to go. The community was in shock and mourning, and I was just a shell of a person, barely holding on. As I walked away from the wreckage of our home, I realized that the creature wasn't just a random encounter. It was a sign of something much bigger, much more terrifying. And I knew that I couldn't rest until I found out what that was. But for now, I just had to keep walking. The storm had destroyed everything I had ever known, and it was up to me to rebuild my life from the wreckage. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I had been wandering aimlessly, searching for answers, trying to make sense of what had happened. But I always seemed to come up empty. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old library that I finally found something that could shed some light on what had happened to my family. In the dusty archives, I found an ancient text that told of a creature known as the Leviathan, a sea serpent that had been feared and worshipped for centuries. The text spoke of the Leviathan as a being of immense power, capable of destroying entire cities with a single swipe of its tail. It was said to live in the darkest depths of the ocean, emerging only when it hungered for flesh and blood. As I read through the text, I realized that the creature that had devoured my family was not just a random encounter. It was the Leviathan, come to exact its revenge on those who dared to defy its power. With this knowledge, I knew that I had to act. I couldn't let the Leviathan continue to roam free, destroying everything in its path. I had to find a way to stop it, once and for all. I consulted with the local experts, and together we came up with a plan. We would lure the Leviathan to the surface using a decoy, and then we would trap it in a giant net. It was a risky plan, but it was our only hope. As the day of the trap approached, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. This was my chance to avenge my family, to make the Leviathan pay for what it had done. But it was also a dangerous undertaking, one that could cost me my life. We set the decoy, and we waited. And then, suddenly, there it was. The Leviathan rose from the depths, its body writhing in the sunlight. It was even more terrifying than I had imagined, with rows of razor-sharp teeth and eyes that glowed like embers. We activated the net, and it fell over the creature's body, trapping it in place. The Leviathan thrashed and roared, but it was no match for the strength of the net. As we dragged the creature onto the shore, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The Leviathan was finally defeated, and my family's deaths had not been in vain. But as I looked at the creature's lifeless body, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. The Leviathan was a powerful and ancient being, and now it was gone forever. As I walked away from the beach, I knew that I had finally found closure. My family was gone, but at least I had avenged their deaths. And as I looked out at the horizon, I knew that the storm had passed, and a new day was dawning.